Good afternoon, and welcome to NCheng LLP Presents Nonprofits for the New World webinar. My name is Shivani Daga, and I'm a Business Development and Operations Director here at NC. For those of you who don't know NCheng LLP, we are the nonprofit accountants. We have served over 500 nonprofits in the past 30 plus years that are fighting and raising all types of awareness, whether it's for social and economic justice, LGBTQ, education, and more. We provide financial management, audit and assurance, tax, technology implementation, and advisory services. As a minority-owned business, we pride over the multicultural and diverse people in the firm that come from over 25 nationalities and fluently speak over 20 different languages. Our managing partner, Nehru Chang's vision was to create a firm that really empowers nonprofits by helping them understand and manage their finances so that they can focus on what matters to them the most, which is their mission. And over time, that became NCheng's mission. For the past 5.5 years, I've been proud to work at NCheng LLP since I got to meet and learn about the amazing work nonprofits are doing every day through our wonderful clients. I would like to take a moment to say a special thank you to all the people that have joined from the nonprofit community. What you are doing is commendable and something you should be proud of. Now, as times are changing due to COVID-19, we're realizing that this may be the new norm. What does that exactly mean for the nonprofit industry? Today, through our webinar and the wonderful panelists and industry experts that have joined, I'm sure that you'll be able to take something away that will help your organization in some way. Now, I'd like to introduce our first panel. If your organization needs a fundraising boost and doesn't know where to start, this is the panel for you. I'd like to introduce Hannah Larry Odell, Managing Partner at Hudson Ferris, Peter J. Heller, Founder at Heller Fundraising Group, Doug Wingo, Founder and Principal at Wingo NYC, Jeff Sobel, Founder and CEO at JSC LLC, and now I'd like to turn it over to the founding partner of Hudson Ferris, Edward Liebman, who will be our moderator. Ed, please take it away.
So much, Shivani, and thank you all for joining us here today. I'm delighted to have such a distinguished panel of colleagues. And I'm going to open it up with our first question, which I'm pretty sure is on everyone's mind, and that is, so none of us saw the COVID pandemic coming. And when it arrived, it fundamentally altered the way we do business and the way that our clients do business. So from a fundraising perspective, if we look at the start of the pandemic to where we are now, to where we are going, I'd love to ask you all about what your observations have been. You know, who has gained and who has lost during this pandemic? I will start with our very own Hannah Odell on that one.
Thanks, Ed. You know, I think what we saw, unlike in other historic catastrophes in the US, is there was no national organization, you know, behind the response. There was no national COVID Red Cross. So donors wanted to do something. They wanted to feel like they could help if they kept their job, you know, but they weren't going out. They had more disposable income. And so they wanted to donate and make a difference. And they turned to their own backyard. We saw a lot of donors giving locally. We saw them giving to organizations they already cared about, but making, you know, outsized gifts or special one-time gifts. And we saw obviously a huge uptick in giving to social services and public health. Food banks, as an example, saw a major increase. Feeding America said giving was up more than 600%. And we saw with one of our own clients right here in New York City, they received 60,000 new donors during the COVID pandemic. So we saw a lot of response on local giving and then a shift towards education. I think once people started to realize that learning loss was going to be a major implication of the pandemic.
Doug, how about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, many of our clients work in the social justice realm, so they saw incredible amounts of new donors, money. Many of our clients, you know, got money from you-know-who, you know, tripling or quadrupling their budgets. They're trying to figure out what to do with that money, you know, how to invest it, how to use those gifts sustainably, how much they should be advertising, you know, this new wealth they have. But their biggest problem and challenge right now is how are they going to renew all those donors? People who saw 1,000 or 2,000 new donors, will they make that second gift? So they're really thinking more strategically about communications probably than they ever did before. Some of them are investing in fundraising, hiring new staff members, hiring consultants, hiring a major gifts officer for some folks who really got a lot of wealthy donors who made a first-time gift of $1,000 or more. So it's been good news for some. Obviously, some of you on the call today are having these same questions. So let's just see. The jury's out about who among that group will renew their gifts. How we can research those folks, figure out who they are, who has the time and inclination and the money to do that. But that's what we're recommending that you do. Throw them into the major donor pool and treat those folks like major donors because they are now.
That's great. And Jeff, how about some observations from your clients?
Sure. Just to play a little bit on the other side, I would say, we had some clients who obviously, I think, really struggled early on because of certain shift in donations from certain individuals who might have moved away from their organizations because of moving into other really important causes at the moment or reduced in that. But also, I think, really some of their major funding streams, unfortunately, the organizations who weren't diverse in their fundraising in various areas really had to find a way to become more diverse and find new revenue streams. If they were really focused on an event and that was a major part of their fundraising, think differently. And what I found over time, the organizations we worked, they became better fundraisers, better best practices. They started using various aspects and using the technology to analyze their information and the way that they're going about fundraising, and ultimately be able to turn the corner. So I think they're actually on a better track, even though they might have taken a couple steps backwards. I see a lot of organizations are better suited now, as someone said, this new world, and really embrace it from a fundraising for their organization and mission.
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? So that's the flip side of the coin during the pandemic. And of course, Peter, when you think about capital campaigns, in such a specific area of fundraising, what did you see go on in those campaigns during the pandemic?
Thanks, Ed, and hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Prior to COVID, a capital campaign was already a very hard thing to do. It's basically an effort to raise money above your baseline budget for either a building project, endowment, or programs. And they're hard to execute regardless of the size of the organization. And they're usually a big sized chunk of money in addition to whatever your budget is. So this took a lot of focus and attention prior to COVID. What we found during the year of COVID, and I'll say that briefly, then I'll talk about now, is the first thing that happened is obviously we all freaked out. And some of that freaking out, some people who were actually in campaigns just went away and said, I can't deal with it this year at all. And those that are actually kind of coming out of the fog right now, others were like, oh my God, this is awful, but we need to stay close to our donors. We need to keep this project going because it's important for the future of our community. And we actually started some capital campaign efforts during COVID. As I'm sure with everybody on the call, we now know all sorts of people who we've never met physically because we're helping them raise money through this screen thing. So basically, if a project is important, there's a way to keep going on it. I guess that would be my bottom line message for right now.
Great. And speaking of this screen thing, which we've all gotten accustomed to, we want to make this just a little bit more interactive. Shivani's going to put up a poll so that we get a better sense of who's in the audience. And we're just asking about the size of your development team, whether you have, how many folks do you have actively working on your fundraising? I think that's going to give our panelists a much clearer view on how they should be addressing these issues. I would also invite everybody to put a question in the chat as they hear it. A lot of these things, you hear a lot of information and you think, well, there's going to be a Q&A and I'm going to save it for that. But I think one of the nice things about Zoom is it's really letting us have this, running list of questions, and we'll do our best to try and address them all. What I would say is that, as what I'm hearing from clients, and I'd love everybody to talk about this. So events, that seems to be top of mind for everybody. Are we going to have events? Are people going to go to the events? Do we have COVID mitigation protocols at the events? Do we have hybrid events? So it's a big question. I probably field it every day, and I don't know that I always have a very ready answer. But Doug, I know you do a lot of events. So what kind of things are you hearing?
Well, we typically would produce 10 or so events every fall. We started planning the events last summer, June, July. 3 of the clients stuck to virtual. Those were clients that were either national or international, so the virtual format works for them. Did beautifully last year, and will continue to work very well, for the decades to come. We had several clients who just said, okay, forget it. We're not doing we want to do an in-person event because we feel we can raise more money. Even though all of our clients, we did 38 virtual events last year, all but 2 met or exceeded their goal, especially with a live ask during the event. But some clients, could raise $300,000 to $500,000 in the room. Those great people, the lucky ones who could do that. So they're not interested in virtual. So they moved their events to May or June. And then the clients that we had, oddly, 3 clients that had events in first week of October. Those clients stuck to their in-person format and have moved their events to the second week of November. So, they polled the board. Would you sell a table? Would you come? Would you invite your friends to come and think your friends would come to an event where food is actually served and no one's wearing a mask, and they said yes. So the fall events, though, are taking on a slight, one is continuing with the format of the sit-down dinner as if nothing had happened. The other 2 events have gotten rid of dinner, and it's more of a stand-up cocktail party, but both indoors. Not everyone obviously can find an outdoor venue for November that, it might not snow that day. But what I can say about is this, that the event clients are doing well. Sponsors are still there. There are more sponsors than there were even a year ago. The economy for donors and corporations has been lovely and wonderful and fabulous. And these people are going to retire early because their portfolios are up. Those are our donors. So those people, it's still the golden age of fundraising. And as you know, for events, many people will not make a gift or not make a large gift unless it's an event and they're getting something for it. So people are giving, events are working. The clients, I'll just say this and shut up, but the clients that did move their events to the spring, 2 of them began their sponsorship programs this fall, so they can get in those gifts before their fiscal year ends on 12/31. And one of them is even moving the event to spring and then redoing the event in the fall. So they're going to have 2 asks within 6 months, which is another reason it's a great time to get their sponsorship asks out now.
So looking ahead into the spring, and I know we have some experience with now trying to get clients a gala together in the spring. People may have canceled it a year ago, and I think maybe you might want to share some of the challenges we're encountering.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things to be aware of. The biggest thing is that it's just even more competitive than ever before. The events industry took such a heavy hit. So we've got, caterers closing up shop, venues shuttering their doors. There's just so much less out there. And so I would say if you're planning a spring event, do it early. Venues with outdoor space are likely already all booked up, right? That's the ideal place to have your event. So I think we're seeing a lot more competition. And then of course, everyone's asking us about the format. And I think virtual is here to stay. So we're talking a lot about what are the benefits of doing something hybrid and having the ability to broadcast out to a national audience. I mean, it does a few things for you, which it makes that in-person experience more exclusive, gives you the opportunity to sell lower dollar tickets, unlimited lower dollar tickets, right? You can reach that national audience that you have been engaging through COVID. And then there's always going to be those major donors who never really wanted to come to your gala in the first place. And they have the opportunity to tune in from home and you can still secure that revenue. So I think that's what we're going to be seeing a lot of in 2022.
I want to touch on a question in the Q&A that Peter answered, but I'd love to hear Jeff's perspective on this. And maybe everyone in the panel will want to opine. It's such a great question. And it sort of loosely ties into events, but so when do you ask people to get together again, right? Like when do you sit down with your major donors and how do you approach that conversation? Jeff, have you been doing some thinking about that.
Yeah, we have. We really have worked with a lot of our clients, very hands-on approach, one-on-one. Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's comfort level is a little different. And it's really, for me, it's an internal question first, and thinking through your own thought process. And then once you've sort of figured out internally, then you can sort of just say, okay, we're going to go and start to reach out to people. I think for me, it's sort of involving the option. So if you're reaching out to a major donor, you're reaching out to a corporation or foundation you want to invite to come visit or go sit and have breakfast with them, give them the option to do it, as well as, no, I'm just not comfortable, but let's jump on a Zoom, right? So to sort of get that. And the only other thing that I would say is people are more prepared to consume information. They have more time. So whatever meetings you're doing, whether they're Zoom or in person, I'm finding that a lot better practices in sending in advance. Hey, these are the subject matters let's talk about. If you have a case or other specifics that you're thinking about them wanting to think about funding, you can get that information to them. I would say pre-COVID, everybody was sort of running around and most likely didn't read what you sent. And that's changing a lot because people during the, they had more time to say, oh, okay, I can sit down and actually read and really be more intentional about the meetings versus, less thought process. You have to sort of get focused. And so that I think has changed the dynamic a little bit.
Well, that's an interesting point. I want to ask this question of Peter. Materials, both for capital campaigns, just major gifts, solicitations, used to be, at least my experience, fairly static as a type, right? Like you would produce a book and you would bring that book and there were schematics, or, the major gift realm, there were certainly leave behinds and all that. How have materials changed for you during COVID? How are you disseminating information?
Yeah, great question. So I think, the headline answer is that a positive of COVID, if you could put it that way, is that a lot of us older dogs are learning new tricks that we thought were never going to be new. So like Jeff was talking about, I would never have advised anybody would solicit a gift over Zoom, of almost any size. And I didn't even want them to solicit gifts over email prior to COVID.
Right.
And now we found that millions of dollars or, tens of thousands of dollars, whatever size organization, can be raised virtually. And, our clients are spending much less money on print publications, or they're doing them as one-offs, as, let's print a small run of these. And they're finding creative ways to put things into PDF or other formats. And yeah,
just to jump on that real quick, the video piece also has really been this, regardless of an organization, because we all have these things now, and you can create your own YouTube channels and all that other stuff. The high-end donors are not expecting, and then we all live on this social media and getting video in all different types of quality. You can show your story in a video and link and all that. And it doesn't have to be, $30,000 to produce a video for somebody. So, they love it, right?
That's a great point. Hannah, you might want to talk about our experimentation with sizzle reels.
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, we've been introducing this as a service to our clients, and it's actually incredible what can be captured just through the iPhone. So our clients are putting together content, and you don't need to bring in a professional videographer. They're capturing this really authentic material and then sending it to our service provider, and he's assembling these really phenomenal 30-second sizzle reels that are great just for capturing somebody's attention, but not so lengthy, and you don't need professional lighting to get the job done.
Doug, are you seeing this in direct marketing? Are you seeing more use of video and less use of static, what I would call static imagery? Yeah.
Yes, for all of our virtual events, we gathered video mostly through Zoom or through cell phones, especially for essentially the first year of the pandemic, and got lots of great diverse folks and information, incredibly compelling. Shared that during the virtual event, and then of course repurposed some of it in the video and social campaigns prior to the event to get people to register for free. But now we're going to repurpose that content for the year-end appeal. So if you have that kind of hanging out, or if you have the video from a gala you did several years ago. It's, reuse that. And getting the board at least to do a 30-second why I give. We're going to this year try with one client for their year-end appeal. Yes, the boards they're going to send out those letters. We're going to try to get them to sign their names to the letters, which of course will mostly be in vain. But we're going to hopefully get the people who are good at it to make that 30-second why I give video and send that out to their list so that their folks will, see them in living color, on their computer screens and feel possibly, one hopes, more compelled to give because it's more personal, but also because, they know and think their friend is watching. So you can't get enough video, and 30-second, 10-second clips for social, reuse. None of us look at that Instagram every day. So, you miss it one day, maybe I'm going to get it again in 6 months, or I won't even remember I saw it 6 months ago. So use it.
That's great. Eunice has a question about the need for video and how does this impact the budget. I think it was touched on, I think Hannah and Doug, you touched on this, that you don't really need to spend a fortune these days to create a video. Would everybody agree with that? Would everybody agree that authenticity is maybe better than polish? Maybe you want to speak to that, Jeff, and Peter, you haven't spoken to this yet.
Yeah, my perspective is I agree. I agree that, for majority of what you're doing, you don't need to spend a lot of money. It can be done. There's, if the best thing I see our clients do is get young interns, high school or college kids. They can move this technology much faster than we can, and they can create the videos and put it in a way that's great, and it's a great sort of free labor, and give them a great experience as well. So that I would take advantage. I would say in some of the more major gift, and let Peter kind of answer this, but on the capital campaign approach, if you're building something in with your case and your materials, that's where I might, spend a little money, but I'd leave that to Peter's thoughts.
Yeah, I think it also really depends. I really like what Jeff said about the iPhone or the Android or whatever. You can, like, for $20, you can get a little tripod that the thing sits on, and you don't even need a microphone. You can do a good recording. But in terms of promoting your campaign activities to your community and your donors, one of the things that I really like is, let's just say, for instance, you're working on a renovation of your building, is to have your executive director or somebody from your staff, or even somebody who's participating in your programs, walk through with their iPhone and show the progress from time to time. If you have a budget and can do, videos every month, and you can do like a stop motion thing to show the progress, great. But you don't need that. You can just show people around for a minute with your iPhone, and then you send that out to your email list. It's really exciting to people.
That's great. One, I guess, big question on COVID. I'm just going to make this a round robin. So maybe we'll start with Jeff and let everybody chime in. Are you using COVID as a centerpiece of your year-end messaging, or do you think that the donor base is tired of it? Is it people want to move past it, or is it still resonant? Go ahead, Jeff.
I think it's a little case by, for a small group.
Of course there varies.
Yeah, for a small group, I think it's really important because they were so involved in, our response to COVID and how we as a society move forward. But for 90%, I wouldn't. And from my perspective, is get back to the basics. And this is our organization. This is our mission. This is why your dollars will do X, Y, and Z. And really live to that message. And, and not draw back because we lost money through the pandemic, or we lost money this way or that way. Just the fact, moving forward, this is what we need as an organization so that we can do X, Y, and Z, and really be honest with the goals and the dollars you really need, and let people respond to that. So,
Doug, what are your thoughts?
I completely agree. I think there is some COVID fatigue in messaging. People are wanting to look forward. There are parts of the country where, COVID appears to be in the rearview mirror. When we were selling our calls, especially for arts groups, we were like, help us get to the other side. Well, we kind of have gotten to the other side. Now what? So really do focus on, I think people claim that we know our donors are searching for meaning. This is a part of the zeitgeist for the next few years. So be aware of that in your messaging. Creating community, creating meaning, engagement. Those things are more important sometimes than I think the numbers of folks we serve or what we did during COVID in this moment.
Yeah, Hannah, you might want to speak to storytelling, right? Are we back to basics on storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say is a lot of our clients particularly are in spaces that deal with more of the long-term fallout of the pandemic, like mental health or impact on students, but their donors are definitely tired of hearing that COVID theme. And so we're trying to tell stories that are forward-looking and optimistic, and telling a story of revitalization, right? Getting America back on its feet, getting students back in the classroom, making up for lost time, right? So definitely a story of hope and highlighting personal stories of the beneficiaries, rather than tying it into this sort of national COVID theme that everybody's a little spent on.
Yeah, and Peter, the old saying is, money gets raised on hope and good news. Is that still holding true? I think we've had a year of fear and despair.
Okay, so I'm in agreement on the storytelling and the case by case basis on whether you're bringing up COVID or not. But I think for all of you fundraisers and other nonprofit staff on today's Zoom, this is the single most important thing I'm going to say. And I'll probably, from here on, if we bring up other issues, it'll probably be a flavor of this thing right here, is you have to believe, okay? You need to ask yourself when you wake up in the morning, do I believe in the mission of the organization that I'm either going to my dining room table and sitting on Zoom to support all day long, or I'm actually going in the office? You need to be like 100% more convinced than you were pre-COVID and pre all the heightened awareness of all the social injustices in our world, that what you're doing matters and that your organization is having a powerful impact for the future of your community, however you define it. Because once you do that, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can raise and what you can do for the organization. And if not, like if I want to take that to an extreme, you should probably close up your nonprofit, because we're in a situation where what we do in the world needs to matter.
I think that's an awesome point. I think it was an awesome point. It was a great speech. And I think it's 100% accurate. It's dead on. And I think what crises do is you've seen, nobody's seen a crisis like COVID. And by that, I mean, we've never lived through an emergency where absolutely everyone was involved, right? Whether that was Hurricane Sandy or whether that was any other 9/11, those were localized. COVID's not localized. Everybody's lived through COVID, and it is a point of time to rededicate yourself and really consider your mission. So I think that's a super cool way to move us to our next topic, which is the social justice movements that we saw that Doug touched upon earlier. I think we all saw an enormous shift in the public conversation. And even still, I think a lot of organizations are looking for a way to address this and to tailor their programs and their messaging to respond to the issues of equity and diversity. And I think it's important for us as fundraisers to think about what does all that mean in the context of fundraising. So I'm going to throw it to Hannah first to kick us off on that topic. And then it would be great for Doug to chime in with a lot of his clients' experience, both at that time and then now almost a year later, to see if anything has in fact changed.
Sure. So I can definitely kick it off. I think with our clients, I mean, we are heavy in the educational and economic equity space. So this is certainly something we talk about a lot. And at Hudson Ferris, when we talk about dismantling racism, in philanthropy, we really think it starts with messaging and how we are talking about and perceiving the beneficiaries of charitable work. So we try to look really closely at the word choice and the language that we use to understand these sort of inherent biases that have been embedded in the way that communities of color are portrayed in the charitable space for far too long. So just a good example, I think, is the word empowerment. You know, it's definitely overused. I think we can probably all agree on that. We hear it all the time. And so we've talked a lot about that with our clients and how it sort of sets this tone that communities of color, you know, cannot advance or achieve on their own, or that doesn't come from within. And somehow that source of power is external, right? So we talk about other ways to describe that, so that we can kind of start to undo these harmful tropes that we have seen perpetuating racism within the nonprofit world, I think, for far too long now. So we've really taken a really close look at messaging in this way. Doug, I don't know how you've seen that among your own client base.
We experienced the frustration of messaging for some of our clients, many of whom are run by Black and brown people, serve primarily Black and brown people, but we're not getting, you know, post, you know, Black Lives Matter movement. They didn't get any money because their messaging was still from, you know, a decade ago or whatever. So they really had to think about how we say, oh my God, we've been doing this work forever. Give us a break. Send us your money, you know? So that was a very curious moment. And for many of them, they had to start using the word equity. For progressive donors, you know, the research has shown use of the word equity in an appeal increases likelihood to give and increases gift size. So if that's you for year-end appeal, use that word in your email, use that word always. And the last thing I would say about this is that you know, community-centric fundraising is here. It is here to stay. You know, avert your eyes at your own peril and go to this website. It's very easy to remember. It's called communitycentricfundraising.org, and figure that out. How does that relate to you? And now, is it time for you to stop listing donors in giving categories? You know, there are many ways that we all perpetuate, you know, not because we're horrible people, but because that's how the system has served us. And, you know, spend 15 minutes on that website, sign up for their newsletter, and send your staff there too. And, you know, think about the ways that we can do things differently moving forward, because we will. And for many of our donor pools, those of us who do a better job of changing will do better in the donor marketplace. So there is some self-interest for everyone.
What I would also say is there's been a lot of discussion about issues that relate to the naming of things through capital campaigns. You know, how much of the donor's prior legacy should factor into the idea of naming something. And do you do some due diligence before you name something for a donor? Also, life trajectories change, right? Somebody could be perfectly acceptable and then be doing something horrible a couple of years later. So Peter, how have those conversations unfolded around capital?
Yeah. First, I just want to say something to Doug. There's been a number of requests in the chat for you to put the community-centric fundraising website, if you wouldn't mind putting that for everybody. Again, like I said at the beginning, prior to COVID, we were already working with a number of organizations on making sure that in their capital campaigns, when a donor stepped up with a pledge or a gift, that gift was legally memorialized in a gift agreement. And within that gift agreement, there was often what we call, for lack of a better term, a morals clause. And that gives the nonprofit the ability to say, you know, based on what our board has determined is okay and not okay, we can rescind this naming or whatever if such and such happens. And I think that the same thing is really true now on you know, maybe even on a more robust level. But there's one thing that's maybe a little contrary that I want to say is that, and I haven't gotten into the debate around naming donors by categories or not very much. So I'm interested in what Doug said and to hear more about that. But let's not pretend that because we all want to be better human beings, that money doesn't matter. Okay, the reason that all of us on this panel are professionals in this area is because we want to help all of you at nonprofits have more money so you can do your missions. So that doesn't mean that a person who has $1 billion is any more worthwhile as a human being than a person who has very, very little money. And that doesn't mean that the nonprofit should treat them as a more important person, but they can't ignore the fact that they have tremendous wealth that can help their mission move forward.
I agree with that.
Yeah, no, I'll just jump in there real quick. And
Please.
just as far as the individual side, that I can't agree more in regards to the gift agreement pieces. I see too many organizations raise money without really memorializing those gifts, but also think of the same, not event giving, but the corporate giving, you know, corporate intentional giving for some of the programs and capital needs that you need. Really think in regards to how you're putting those in agreements as well, and who you're working with, right? And who those companies are. And I think that also affects some of them, without us going down a rabbit hole with the social justice piece, you know, that can also really think in regards to, you know, who do you want to be in partner with that says, hey, we're proud to be corporate partners with, you know, X, Y, and Z. So
I would just add quickly, also think carefully about denouncing former event honorees. Recently, a client sent out an email, you know, denouncing their first honoree who got caught up with Cuomo, a woman who many people know and love. And, you know, you have to think about that, you know, and, you know, the sad, you know, these are, but, you know, the board has to make that decision.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I did want to move to our last general area, which I think is interesting, and that is, how do you staff your department? How do you staff your fundraising function, I would say, because not everybody has a department. In fact, I think the vast majority of the folks here have fewer than 5 development staff at their organizations. So let's take this in segments. Maybe Hannah, you want to start with the startups, those that have 0 or none. And then maybe Doug, you want to speak to that, Doug and Jeff, to the mid-level. And then Peter, because you do advise so many organizations on their major gifts programs, how do you, if you're a larger shop, what do you do differently now? So go ahead, Hannah, on the startups, and then pass it over to Doug and Jeff for the mid-sized.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of clients that come to us because they are actually looking for their first development hire. And they realize we have no systems, we have no infrastructure. Who is this person? What do they need to be excellent at? And are they that unicorn, right? The one who's gonna plan your major event, solicit 6-figure gifts, and write your grants, right? So they'll come to us with a lot of these questions. And what we always say is, first of all, that person doesn't exist, right? Because once they reach a certain level of seniority, they specialize, and that person is not gonna write your grants anymore. So what you need to do is really find what works best for your organization and then double down on that. And while diversifying your revenue is very important, I think we saw that even more in COVID, not every organization needs to be chasing the major gifts and having a targeted foundation effort and seeking corporate sponsorship and doing grassroots campaigning, right? That doesn't work for everybody, and you're not going to find a person who's going to manage all that for you. So we say find what works best, and then go find that mid-level person that you can afford, who's hungry, right? And has the expertise that aligns with that. And then maybe consider filling in some of those gaps with some outsourced support, be it research or strategy or the other areas that's going to help that person, you know, lift that person up. So that would be my advice, I think, if you're looking to make your first development hire.
Doug and Jeff, on the mid-size, maybe you have a team, you have a director and an assistant. What are you thinking about? How do you resource that team now?
Well, it really depends on how many events you do. Most people who have the development director and the development assistant or development associate, yeah, what do you need? What's the next hire? Is it events, which are so incredibly time consuming, but can be lucrative? You know, they do many great things for us. Or do you need a grant writer? You know, do you have a great board? Even if you're a startup, some startups have very well capitalized boards. Do you need to focus someone on individual giving? You know, that's mostly what we tell our clients to do. You know, pull someone away, find someone and they can do the comms work as well, but someone needs to focus on small gifts, small campaigns. There's so many digital campaigns we're doing now, so many different ways to raise money from individuals, and they're all time consuming. And then, somebody also must pay attention to the major donors, however they're defined, and work with the ED or the board chair to facilitate those meetings. Yeah, I completely agree. It really is, where does your money come from? And, what do you need to do? Can you find an outsourced grant writer, which not everyone can? Sometimes they're very expensive. It's improbable. The ED spending half her weekend writing grants, that's untenable. In development shops, a lot of it, change finally comes when people are overworked or when somebody leaves and we just can't take it anymore. We lost our writer, now what? And it's hard to.
Yeah. No, I would definitely agree with all that, Doug. I think that's really important. I think too many organizations that we come to, when I ask them to say, okay, can I see your 3-year history in the various areas and how that has been moved and what's been the ups and downs, and have you started to forecast for the future? Like, given the nature of the dynamics and where the money's coming from, very few organizations do that. And I think it's a huge step. It doesn't take an enormous amount of time, but just spreadsheet, and I hate to say it, but just spreadsheeting sometimes can really paint a picture for you to say, the light bulb will go off and say where we need to concentrate. And so that to me, I think is really important. And then there's a lot of creative ways between FTEs, part-times, given the current dynamics, there are a lot of people who are looking to be 1099 and work a couple days a week. And sometimes the right person working 2 days can be more effective than someone working 5 days. If they're focused on, let's say, major gifts or, mid-level donors, or just focused on grants. So I think that to me is really important, is try to sort of take that time to plot it out and then really see where you can focus and choose where you're going to put those resources toward. So.
Agreed. And Peter, when you're looking at a big shop, what are the trends? What are the challenges? What do you do now?
Well, you would think, because I've worked as a staff member in big shops, that everything's hunky-dory. But as human beings, we have the ability to spend, half an hour on Instagram or Facebook and not really focus our time. So, or that's an extreme example, half an hour kind of going down a rabbit hole at something at the office that's not, the most important. So what we do, not only with the staff in my company, but what we do with our clients is we try to encourage people and coach them and prod them on to figure out what are the most important things you're going to be doing this week are. What are the most important things even in your year? Like, it's one thing to get hired, have a job description, and then go to work. Most organizations don't have a conversation with their staff member on, okay, that's their job description, but what are the actual tasks that you're going to conduct this year, and how are we going to measure your effectiveness, month by month, quarter by quarter, even week by week. So and to just add to that, we've all said one way or another, is that my belief is you need to focus enough time to raise gifts from the cohort of your community that has the most capability to give them most money. And that's usually individuals with some sort of wealth. It can be foundations, it can be corporations, sometimes it's some government thing, but you have to make sure you're focusing on that. And like Doug was saying, the ED isn't spending all weekend writing grant proposals that are going to get you $5,000. And then just, Ed, I'll finish up by, there's a question here from Cindy in the chat about, it's so hard to scale fundraising when we don't have any development staff. And Cindy, I would just say, yes, that's, we've all dealt with it. It's one of the most hard things to do. And there's just like this kind of, you're at this stage, you need to get here. And there's this kind of challenging hump of harder work you need to get over. And maybe other people have better solutions, but I just, like, you got to figure out some valve that you can turn that gets you from here to there.
Yes, and that's a great point. I'm glad we got that question in. We are unfortunately at time, but we would love to hear after this panel. I'm sure myself and the rest of the panelists to welcome any questions. I believe a contact list will be shared, so please feel free to reach out. I can speak for everyone here. I've known them professionally for a long time. We're all happy to help, and we're not, super guarded about our ideas. We're happy to just answer questions and get to know everybody. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you so much to NCheng and to Shivani for organizing this panel and convening this wonderful day. Thank you.